I will address a comment on one of my recent videos. Note: in order to understand this video, you'll have to understand generic subjective continuity. You can learn what it is by reading philosopher Tom Clark's essay, Death, Nothingness and Subjectivity, listening to Sam Harris' podcast episode, The Paradox of Death, or by watching my past videos on this topic. Some have said they see my points about generic subjective continuity and David Benatar's antinatalism as causing me to be indifferent to the lives of individuals and the uniqueness of each person's life and their sufferings. I'm personally not indifferent to each individual's specific problems in their individual life. My view actually requires me to acknowledge and implement those differences. I'm well aware that some lives are worse than others. It is actually the asymmetry argument that doesn't take into account the varieties of conscious experiences that exist, and reduces all life to bad, and is motivated by the ideal of stopping all human procreation, although Benatar admits that such an outcome is highly unlikely. But he says that extinction due to no more procreation is preferable. So we could think of any life in the universe as bad. Benatar says that no life is worth causing to exist, because all lives include suffering, and no amount of suffering is acceptable. I agree that all lives include suffering. All in any life. If you were born someone else, then as a person that subscribes to Benatar's antinatalism, that life is also something that's not preferable to non-existence. No matter what, non-existence is preferable, and the wish of this specific brand of antinatalism. For Benatar, the ideal is an eternity of no experience, or endless non-experience, an endless lack of experience, which is not possible, as pointed out by generic subjective continuity. Here's a thought experiment I use to explain it. Imagine you're sitting in a room with billions of speakers all of the same size, and all playing the same exact song at exactly the same volume. I make them all the same volume and song, because of what I explained in the last paragraph. All in any life is a bad, across the board. So, the asymmetry argument reduces all lives to bad. Okay, so now you're in a room with billions of speakers playing one song at the same volume. If you closed your eyes, it'd be as if the song was coming from one speaker. Now imagine that all of the speakers bust, and now only one is playing, but at the exact moment all of the other speakers busted, the one remaining speaker's volume got turned up to the exact volume, still playing the same song that was being achieved by the billions of speakers, so when you close our eyes again, there's no auditory difference between the sound coming from the one speaker compared to the billions. If they had broken when your eyes were closed the first time, and the adjustment to the one speaker was made while your eyes were closed, you wouldn't have detected any difference. You would have continued to believe that the song was still coming from the billions of speakers. Again, Benatar says that no life is worth causing to exist, because all lives include suffering, and no amount of suffering is acceptable. I agree with Benatar that life inevitably includes suffering, but he doesn't see that if it were not this experience, the one reading this right now, then it'd be some other experience via some other brain. Because of generic subjective continuity, but that experience wouldn't be acceptable either. And if it were some other life, it would be unacceptable as well. No life is acceptable. The asymmetry argument ignores the differences between each individual life. But once you see that each life is different, which I know Benatar knows, but his asymmetry argument doesn't take into account, due to a reason I'll get to soon, and once you bring generic subjective continuity into the picture, you see that Benatar's fallacious foundation for his antinatalism renders a NY pursuit of his ideal outcome is futile. He does notice, in his book, and elsewhere, that antinatalism, in general, would have the byproduct effect of reducing the number of people and animals suffering, but his asymmetry argument is what I'm focused on, because it is what differentiates his antinatalism from others. It's his keystone. This means we must address each individual person's or animal's suffering, as some suffer more than others. His actually requires there to be peaceful oblivion, before and after each life. An experience of no experience, as Tom Clark states it. Benatar is unaware of his assumption and belief in this, just as people are unaware of the amount of suffering in life. He rightly points out their lack of awareness of this. His assessment of suffering is correct. But there's no way to avoid experience, as it is always present for itself, as Tom Clark pointed out in his essay, Death, Nothingness and Subjectivity. And once you see this, you must find other reasons for not having kids. Even if it's as simple as, I don't want to, or, for the sake of the planet, or so there's less factory farming, or, I have have a genetic disorder that I do not want to impose on anyone, etc. Why am I so concerned with pointing all of this out? There are a few reasons, but a big one is that there are many people who have scolded their parents for causing them to exist. As a teenager I did this. I wish I were never born. Why didn't you bring me here? Question mark. As if I were enjoying not existing before I existed. Of course there are people that have the right to protest their having been caused to exist. Individuals whose parents knew beforehand that the person would have a lifetime of suffering due to whatever reasons. So it comes down to the reasoning behind our protests. Thank you for listening.